Good evening, everyone. It gives me great pleasure as Chairman of High Cancer Care to welcome you all to this webinar on food for thought as we transition out of lockdown with nutritionist Jenna Hope and in conversation with celebrity interviewer Suzanne Baum. And we are particularly pleased to be hosting this webinar because for over 30 years, education has been central to everything we do at High Cancer Care. It was the first service that we started with 30 years ago, and now we have 64 specialized services. And we started with a lecture in a synagogue hall, and now through modern technology, we can now benefit from sitting in our homes and watching it through the internet. We've always recognized how important nutrition is, but it's more about making informed choices. And we shouldn't beat ourselves up if we want that little bit of chocolate, as long as it's balanced, as I'm sure we're going to hear from Jenna. In fact, at High, our first center was called the Center for Health, and that is something we always concentrate on at High, is try to keep healthy. And tonight is more of a general talk. If anyone has any specific questions that are cancer related, because they are most probably going to be more complex, please would you send them in, email them to info@highcancercare.org, and we can put you in touch with our dietitian who will be able to give you advice that is going to help you with your own specific problem. Obviously, we can do it over Zoom or phone or whatever's easier, but please do contact High if there's anything that's specifically cancer related. And now it gives me great pleasure to hand over to Suzanne Baum, who is going to be in conversation with Jenna. Suzanne is Deputy Editor of TI Media, a freelance journalist and celebrity interviewer. Suzanne, thank you.
Hi, Louise. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Louise. I'm absolutely delighted to be involved in tonight's event. I've had a very, very long association with High. My father, Professor Baum, is a medical patron of the charity and also on the medical advisory board. So growing up, all I ever heard about was the wonderful work that High did. And also High, unfortunately, or fortunately, has been there to support many of my friends who've unfortunately been touched by cancer and their families. And the work you do is amazing. Throughout the last few months, as part of my job, I've been interviewing celebrities and also fitness and health experts on life in lockdown, chatting about everything from fitness goals to health and nutrition. And tonight, I'm absolutely delighted to chat to Jenna Hope, who is the most wonderful nutritionist. Hi, Jenna, so good to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm so excited to do this in combination with High as well. So thank you so much, and I'm really looking forward to it.
So Jenna has years and years of experience, and she's going to guide us through the benefits of healthy eating as we hopefully start to transition very soon out of lockdown. Jenna, the coronavirus epidemic has obviously had an enormous impact on our nutrition. From binge eating through boredom to drinking gallons of wine through anxiety. What have been the main issues that you've sort of come across?
So I think this is such a huge question, and absolutely, everyone is going to have their own individual challenges. And some of the things that I've seen amongst my personal clients and in sort of the space as a whole, firstly is a significant increase in alcohol consumption. And for some people, they're using it as a stress-related reason to drink. Other people are using it as more of a social. They're Zooming, they're getting out their glass of wine, and they're just drinking a lot more than they would do normally. Now, when it comes to alcohol, it's all about moderation. And I love a glass of wine just as much as anyone else. But it's really important that we start to become a bit more aware of our habits. And is the alcohol creeping in every day? Is it creeping in every other day? Is it creeping in a lot more than it used to be? Because actually these are habits that then can stay with us and transition with us out back into our normal lives. And it's something that we don't want to be overdoing. So many of us are aware of the impact of drinking too much alcohol on our general health, but also if we look at it in terms of the effect that it has on our dietary choices. So for example, the next day after drinking, you're much more likely to crave those higher sugar foods and to crave more of them as well. So that can have a knock-on effect. For some people, they've been, like you say, binge eating as a way to manage their stress. And I definitely think that we should touch on that a little bit later with the reasons why people use food as to help them to deal with their stress. What I've also seen is a huge amount of myths in the media about what you should be consuming, you know, what you shouldn't be consuming, what you should be supplementing with. And I think it's really important to just be aware that actually, if you are going to be supplementing and if you are going to be reading things that are not necessarily evidence-based, there is a risk to that. So say, for example, let's take vitamin C, okay? Loads of people know that vitamin C plays a vital role in the immune function, and it absolutely does. But for some people, supplementing with high doses of vitamin C can actually overstimulate the immune system and cause unbelievable amount of stress for people who've got autoimmune conditions that can further enhance those symptoms. So it's really important to be aware that actually we can't always go for the supplement and we can't always believe every single thing that we read. And you know that more than anyone, Suzanne.
Yeah, because as a beauty journalist as well, I get sent tons and tons of press releases saying, you know, take this supplement, use this beauty product, it will help you fight the virus. And I read it and know most of the time it's rubbish. So Jenna, how do people know who to believe and what not to believe?
Great question. I think firstly, if someone's trying to sell you a product and they're trying to claim that it's going to cure a huge problem, I would check with that brand. So do they have scientific evidence behind them? And often the brands that have scientific evidence behind them are more than happy to jump on the phone with you. They'll explain to you, they'll show you their evidence. Whereas actually, if they don't have that evidence, then trying to get hold of it would be significantly harder. If anything sounds too good to be true, the chances are it probably is. Yeah. And the truth is, yes, nutrition is vital. Nutrition is so important for our general health, but it's not a miracle cure and there's no magic pill out there. And I think it's just so important to remember that. And sometimes when we are feeling a bit more vulnerable or when we have got a problem that we can't solve, we tend to try and look for those magic answers and they just don't exist.
And I'm just going to jump in here to say, if anybody watching wants to ask questions, we've got a live question chat on the screen. So please put in any questions you want to ask Jenna, and I'll put them to her. Jenna, anxiety and stress. Obviously, food plays a huge part in anxiety and stress, and anxiety levels have gone through the roof the last 3 months. What foods should people be focusing on more than sort of high sugared foods? What healthy foods should we be eating to not only stimulate our brains but our health too?
That's a great question. So when we're stressed, we produce the stress hormone cortisol, and that's produced by the adrenal glands. And too much cortisol and too much stress can put a lot of pressure on the adrenal glands. And as a result of that, the adrenal glands will draw nutrients from other areas of the body in order to be able to support the production of the cortisol. So what that means is we need to make sure that we're consuming healthy foods in order to make sure that we've got enough adequate nutrients status to be able to draw on those stores. So magnesium plays a key role, and magnesium can be found in things like green leafy vegetables. It can be found in things like dark chocolate, which a lot of people, would love to know. Also things like beans and pulses are a really good source of magnesium as well. Vitamin C is also really important when it comes to supporting the adrenal glands. So largely found in fruits and vegetables. And really, I really try and focus and promote a food first approach. So it's not about trying to get these nutrients that I'm suggesting from supplements. It's really about trying to get them from your food. Then we know that B vitamins also play a vital role, and B vitamins come from whole grains, meat, fish, eggs. So really, really important. And they also play a role in energy. And often people, when they are stressed or they are anxious, might feel that they've got less energy because they're using so much of their stores up to create this cortisol. So it's really important that generally we're eating a healthy, balanced diet. Okay. When it comes to stress, though, just quickly, just to sort of go on from stress, is that people are much more likely, exactly like you say, to eat those higher sugar foods. And the reason that is because actually, whilst they're consuming those higher sugar, higher fat foods, that actually dampens down the release of cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So all of a sudden they feel much calmer. And that's one of the reasons why people, like you say, tend to go for those foods.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to go on now to one of the biggest issues, sleep. So obviously nutrition and sleep go hand in hand. I think at the beginning of lockdown, everybody I spoke to had trouble sleeping, from not being able to fall asleep to having strange dreams. What should we be eating to sort of help us get a good night's sleep?
So another really good question. When it comes to sleep, really, we want to be looking for foods that are going to support the production of the sleep hormone melatonin. So that's things that are high in something called tryptophan. And we're looking at beans, chickpeas, oats are a really good source of tryptophan, pineapple, meat as well. So trying to get a variety is really important, but also looking at the time that you're eating dinner. So let's say you're going to eat a big meal just before you go to bed. What happens is actually your body temperature increases. And when you're trying to go to sleep, what you want is your body temperature to drop. So all of a sudden you've got a little bit of a conflict going on there. That's the first thing. The second thing is that your sleep hormone melatonin is largely produced in the gut. So if you're busy digesting and processing food, actually your gut is focusing on digesting your dinner rather than producing and absorbing your melatonin, the sleep hormone. So therefore, that can have a significant impact on your ability to fall asleep. So I would definitely try and say give it 2 hours at least to eat before you go to sleep. So you've got time for that digestion to happen, your body temperature to then also come down, and therefore you can produce and absorb that melatonin.
I'm going to try that tonight. Thank you. And one other thing, fitness. Keeping active during lockdown and as we go out of lockdown, I think is obviously hugely important. There's obviously lots of old wives' tales about what you should and shouldn't eat, say, for example, before going for a run. What's your advice? Like, is it still true to have a banana before to give you energy, or are things like that just not true? What's the best food basically to eat before you exercise? So
no, definitely. Some people, the biggest thing with this is people often ask, should we eat on an empty stomach or should we eat, once on a full stomach or having had a snack? And bananas are a really great source of fast releasing carbohydrates, which are really important when you're doing something like running. If you're doing something like yoga, for example, then you won't need such a fast release of carbohydrates. And actually, you might be better on an empty stomach if you're doing it in the morning, or something a bit more protein rich. For example, some Greek yogurt and some berries with some cinnamon would be a really good option there.
We lost Jenna.
Am I still here?
Hello?
Hello? Can you see me?
Have we frozen?
Am I back?
Jenna?
Hello? Suzanne, I think we might have lost you.
I've lost you. I'm here.
Okay, I think we're both here. We might just be frozen on each other's screens. So really, when it comes to eating before exercise, generally it's a personal preference. If you're doing something high intensity or for a long duration, then a high carbohydrate, fast releasing snack would be a great option. And then refueling after exercise with a good source of protein. So whether that be some eggs in the morning for breakfast or some Greek yogurt, as I just mentioned, or whether that be a dinner, so for example, some chicken or some fish in the evening if you're going to be exercising just before dinner. Really try and make it work for you. I think sometimes when it comes to nutrition, there's so many rules that people feel like they have to follow. And whilst guidance is really, really important and really helpful, for some people, if those rules don't suit them, they can almost feel like they failed. And that's definitely not the message that we want to be putting out to people. So sometimes it's just about listening to your body, listening to what works for you and how you feel best, and then going off of that.
Okay. the COVID virus has obviously affected people of all sorts of people. People with diabetics, people with diabetes are obviously very vulnerable. Are there any food choices you would suggest that they eat or that they don't eat to sort of keep themselves healthy?
So diabetes is a really complicated disease, and it's definitely something that I would recommend people get personal advice on. As a general answer to that question, there has been research to suggest that a lower carbohydrate diet is more beneficial when it comes to diabetes and managing blood sugar levels. So potentially looking at that. But the research is very mixed because low carb can be classified under different definitions and different amounts of carbohydrate grams. So generally, low carbohydrate is recommended, but please do seek personalised professional advice before implementing a low carb diet as a diabetic.
Okay, great advice, thank you. And on to the topic of drinking water. I have to remind myself to drink water by filling up a really tall bottle. How much water should we be drinking?
So this is a really good question, because this is often one of the things that people will come to me and say, it's great, you know, I drink 4 or 5 litres of water a day, expecting me to say, wow, that's fantastic. Actually, we need to be really careful because we can definitely overdo it with water. So around 2 to 2.5 litres of water is what we should be aiming for a day. But really, if it's hot or you're doing a lot of exercise, you might need a little bit more than that. On the whole, you don't want to be going significantly over, because what happens is you can disrupt the fluid balance in your body, and that will significantly impair your body's ability to function properly if you really disrupt your electrolyte balance. So, you know, 2 to 2.5 litres of water a day is ample.
Okay, and also I suppose very good for your skin at the same time. Exactly.
Yeah. And the other thing with staying hydrated actually is that often when you are dehydrated, you're much more likely to mistake that dehydration for hunger. So that feeling of you know, thirst, often people will think, oh, actually I'm hungry. So I'm sure we've all had it where we think, oh, we're really hungry, have a snack, and we still don't feel satisfied. So maybe have something else and we still don't feel satisfied. Drink a glass of water and all of a sudden we're satisfied, and actually we were only just thirsty in the first place. So if we can prevent that getting to that stage of thirst or dehydration, then you can prevent overeating as a result of that as well.
Okay, and quite interesting. Do you think our eating habits are going to change as we come out of lockdown and soon we'll be allowed to hopefully eat out and eat at friends' houses and go to restaurants? Should we just sort of continue, like, do you think there's going to be any changes to the way we eat? Do you think we're going to be sort of more mindful about what we choose in a restaurant?
I mean, I'd like to think so. I think initially people might get overexcited and, you know, they haven't been to a restaurant in months. They can have whatever they want on the menu. And there's definitely a time and a place for that. There's definitely a time to think, you know what, I just want to enjoy what I'm going to order, eat it, enjoy it, and move on from it. And absolutely. But what I would say is if people start going back to, you know, a lot of people were going to restaurants 3 times a week before lockdown. Yeah. Some people more, some people less. And if you're going to a restaurant regularly and you're ordering whatever you want on the menu, that can start to have an impact on your overall health. So, you know, once a week, okay, but 3 times a week, really start to make sure that you are filling your plate up with lots of vegetables, good sources of protein, complex carbohydrates, and less of the added sauces, less of the alcohol, less of the bread baskets while you're sitting there talking and munching. And I'm not suggesting that bread is bad, but when we start to throw in the starter, the bread, the olives, the alcohol, the dessert, and the main 3 times a week, that can all of a sudden significantly increase the amount that we are consuming. So yeah, I would just say just to be aware of that.
Okay, and loads of questions have been coming in from people watching on Facebook and YouTube. So thank you guys, and keep them coming because we're going to go and try and address them all. Jenna, one of the questions that's come in, I'm going to read out, is what causes cramp and what are the best foods to treat it? That's from Deborah Clifton.
Thank you, Deborah. So cramp can be caused by a number of things. One of the most common things is high levels of caffeine consumption. So if you're consuming a lot of coffee and chocolate, for example, or caffeinated drinks, that's definitely something that I would recommend cutting down on because that can have a significant effect. Also, sometimes for some people, high amounts of uric acid can also cause some cramps. So I would definitely see if you're consuming high purine foods, and that comes in the form of lots of meat, lots of fish, oats as well. So have a look at that too.
And somebody, in fact, quite a few people are messaging in to say their kids have obviously gone back to school. Hooray! And taking packed lunches.
Yeah.
Obviously, kids are not directly affected as much as adults are with the virus, but what are the best foods they should be eating in their packed lunch?
So definitely when it comes to children, what I would say is trying to get them involved in the decisions. So you want to make sure that the lunch you're giving them, they're actually going to want to consume. So the very first step is sitting down with them and discussing with them what they want to consume as part of their packed lunch. The next thing is try and get as much vegetables in there as possible and protein. So do away with sort of the jam sandwiches and really try and make sure that you're putting in chicken or fish or eggs, or, for anyone who might be vegan, tofu, for example, making sure that you're not using white bread, but you're using whole grain bread, making sure that rather than adding in, crisps, for example, you can make apple chips. So you slice an apple really, really thinly, lay it on a baking tray with some cinnamon, a little bit of oil, rub it all around, and then bake it in the oven for about 25 to 30 minutes. And just get a little bit creative so that the kids don't feel like, they're watching everyone else eat crisps and chocolate, but at the same time, they're sat there with a whole apple. You can be a bit more exciting. You can do that with vegetables as well. The other thing that I would say is you can make things like healthier flapjacks. So if you do want to send your kids with a little after kind of main snack, then a healthier flapjack made with oats and honey rather than lots of refined sugar and golden syrup can be really beneficial as well.
Brilliant. I'm going to make that lunch tonight. It's going to be a nice and healthy one. Loads and loads of questions about calorie counting. Obviously very topical when it comes to nutrition. What are your thoughts on calorie counting? I mean, in the early days for fat loss, do you think it's a good thing to do, or do you disagree with it?
I think for someone who has never looked at what they've eaten before and has absolutely no idea about it, it can be a really good basic place to start, just to simply have an idea as to actually what you are consuming. But the risks with it is firstly, not all calories are equal. I would argue that. So calories are utilized in different ways. And an example of this would be, for example, is if you take a tortilla, for like a Dorito type corn style crisp or chip or whatever you want to call it, and then you take sweet corn. Essentially, they're both made from corn. But if you see, I'm sorry to go into this, but the next day, you might notice that the sweet corn is less digested than the corn from the Dorito. And actually, that gives you a really good idea to show you that actually calories are not all absorbed in the same way. So not all calories are equal. And making sure that you're getting your calories from whole foods is much more important than the number. So sometimes it can be that because, one cereal bar might have a lower amount of calories than another option, than a handful of nuts, for example, someone might be more inclined to go for the cereal bar. But the cereal bar might contain more sugar, less nutrients in general, so actually not so good for our general health and our nutritional status, as opposed to the nuts. So I think it can be beneficial. Don't get too hung up about it. Not all calories are equal. And the other thing is, for anyone who does have a bad relationship with food or has ever had an eating disorder, I would 100% strike it off instantly and please do not entertain it at all.
Wonderful advice. Thank you. Now we have Joel Barnett who's asking about protein powder. Obviously, a lot of guys sort of wanting to build up muscle or on some sort of fitness regime take protein powder. I have a son that takes it to bulk up. What are your thoughts on it?
So definitely, it can be a really beneficial thing to include in the diet if you're struggling to get enough protein. One of the things that with it is, again, just make sure that you're buying a protein powder that doesn't have loads of artificial additives and sweeteners and sugars and bulking agents. So make sure that it's a good quality protein powder and that you don't start supplementing your meals for that. So if you're struggling to get enough protein, absolutely great. but it is an addition to the diet rather than, you know, using it as a meal replacement shake.
Okay, great. So we have Alison Barr, who's asking Jenna, what are your thoughts on probiotics, which I'm so interested in because I buy them in the supermarket. There's always adverts to get them. Are they as good as the adverts say they are?
This is a really good question. Thank you, Alison. So firstly, just for anyone who's unclear on the difference between pre and probiotics, I'll just describe them. So probiotics are the bacteria that you put inside your gut. Prebiotics are the food to feed that bacteria. So essentially, you need the bacteria to thrive and survive, and the prebiotics will allow that to happen. They can be beneficial. They're not essential. So firstly, not everyone needs them, but they can be beneficial for some people who struggle with gut symptoms. But at the same time, again, I'm sorry, it's not a clear-cut answer. Please be careful because sometimes, for example, one might be experiencing something called SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where you have bacteria in the small intestine, which is not what we want. We want bacteria in the large intestine. If you take probiotics, all you're going to do is allow that bacteria in the small intestine to grow. So really make sure the reason why you're taking them, and definitely check with a healthcare professional before you take them. In answer to your question about buying them in the supermarkets, again, I would just be aware of some of the brands out there. So not all of the bacteria will survive. If it's not such good quality bacteria, it won't necessarily survive. So make sure that you do your research and ask the brands for their evidence as well that that bacteria survives. Otherwise, you're just wasting your money.
And out of interest, are they safe for children to have as well as adults?
So there are definitely ones that are specific for children. When it comes to probiotics, there's so many different strains of probiotics and types of bacteria. So you want to make sure that you're getting the one that is appropriate for children. So yes, you can get for children.
Let's get through these questions. We have Charlotte Hildebrand, who's asking you, Jenna, my husband's a vegetarian, or her husband is a vegetarian, and is allergic to corn. What are the best alternatives to increase protein content other than lentils and tofu? Wow, great question, Charlotte.
Really good question. So if he's vegetarian, then dairy sources are a really good place to start. So things like cheese, milk is also good, great source, yogurt, and then also things like eggs. And then things like soya beans are really good, chickpeas, so you can get really creative with that. Things like hummus are great, like you say, lentils, beans, nuts, seeds, tahini, peanut butter. So there are lots of different options. You know, you don't just have to go for corn, and try and get creative with it just to keep it entertaining.
Great question, Charlotte. Thank you. And we have Natasha Field, who's asking a question that has actually come up quite a few times on the chat. Breakfast. Is it essential to eat it as soon as you wake up? And can eating patterns speed up your metabolism? So how important is breakfast?
Breakfast for some people is the most important meal of the day because it sets their blood sugar balance for the rest of the day. And so if you're hungry and you're thinking, I'm going to try and lose weight, I'll skip breakfast, all that happens is your blood sugar levels will fall and you'll get to a point where you feel much more hungry and you'll be more likely to overeat at that point. If you're not hungry and you simply, some people just can't even look at breakfast in the morning and you're genuinely not hungry, then by all means, breakfast is not the most important meal of the day. It will not speed up your metabolism. And really wait until you get to a stage where you are hungry and you are ready to eat. So I think that's really a personal preference there.
Okay. Right, we have the lovely Amy Wagner who's asking, what's the best way to stop feeling bloated?
Okay, so bloat, again, to some degree it's normal, and I think it's really important to just be aware of that. Often people think as soon as they get a tiny bit bloated, you know, something's up. To some degree it's normal. If it's starting to impact your life, then there can be multiple things that are contributing to your bloat, and whether that be an imbalance of your gut bacteria, whether that be stress, that can have a huge effect on bloatedness, whether it be food or dietary intolerances or allergies, that can also play a role. So if it is significantly impacting your life, definitely check it out. And then what can you do to try and limit it? Well, firstly, try not to overeat. So sometimes we get bloated because we simply eat too much. Secondly, for people who do suffer from something like IBS, look at the types of carbohydrate you're consuming and the amount as well. So sometimes you might be able to tolerate a certain amount of carbohydrate or a certain amount of dairy. As soon as you go over that, you get bloated. So bloatedness is going to be very different for everyone. There's going to be a very different cause, and therefore the cures are going to be very different. So I can't really give a general answer to that. It's not like drink peppermint tea or anything like that. Unfortunately, there's just no evidence behind those things.
Okay, thank you. During lockdown, I've written on all sorts of different eating habits, from people that binge for comfort eating to trying different methods of eating, like intermittent fasting. And we have Gav Cohen on our Facebook chat that's actually asked a question about that. Is intermittent fasting a good and healthy way to lose weight?
Hi, Gav. Thank you very much for your question. This is probably the most common question that I get asked, especially at the moment. So what the research shows is that for males, it might be more beneficial. There isn't enough long-term research to show over sort of a period of 2 years. And that's the thing that we're most interested in. A lot of diets will work for 2 years. And after that is where there might be, the weight might catch up on us. So if it works for you, you enjoy it and you feel like it's non-restrictive, then absolutely enjoy it. And it can be a way to help you lose weight. If you have, not you, Gab, but if someone has a history of an eating disorder or a bad relationship with food, then I wouldn't recommend it, because again, it's very restrictive and limiting.
Okay, thank you. And Rachel Gottlieb is asking, going back to the protein bars and shakes, there's so many available these days, especially ones that say they're natural. Do you believe these are good for you? Should they only be eaten post high intensity exercise?
So protein bars are, I'd say, slightly different to protein powders. Often a lot of the bars have a lot of added sugars, a lot of added sweeteners, bulking agents, and it's actually quite challenging to find a good quality protein bar. I would recommend sticking more to sort of the date and nut type bars, because they're going to provide you with some protein, or a good quality protein powder that you can mix into yogurt or a smoothie, for example. And really, a lot of the protein bars I would really recommend staying away from.
And I'm smiling because there's so many questions that are similar to the one I'm going to ask you from Jodie Lazarus. One's also from other people saying that they're out exercising. So Jodie, for example, her husband's a cyclist. When he comes home, he's starving. What are the healthiest foods he can eat that will stop him from eating the contents of the fridge? I'm just saying here, loads of people have asked a similar question, Jenna. They've been out for a run, they've been for a spin, they just want to come home and eat. So what are the best foods to eat?
So really good question. Again, it kind of depends on the time of day that he's going to get home from, because you want something appropriate. But let's take the time of day out of it for a moment. It comes down to making sure that you've got good quality protein and that you've got a good source of complex carbohydrates. So during endurance exercise, you deplete all your glycogen, or you deplete a significant amount of your glycogen, which is your carbohydrate stores. That's going to leave you feeling really hungry. So as an example, if you come home and have a bowl of some brown rice or some quinoa, for example, and you add in some chicken or some salmon, that's going to be a really good option. Alternatively, eggs on, like the German rye toast. Do you know that?
Yeah.
So eggs on that, for example, that's a really good option. Some green pea pasta. So often I recommend green pea pasta as an alternative to whole grain or white pasta. And the reason for that is because it provides a really good source of carbohydrate, but it also provides a good source of protein. And it's that protein that's going to help to keep you fuller for longer. So you need the carbohydrates to refuel, the protein to also help to support and rebuild muscle damage and support repair, but also to keep you full for a longer period of time. So definitely try and get that in there. And if you are a vegetarian or a vegan, then something like a mixed bean salad or a tofu wrap, whole grain wrap would be a good option there as well. Okay,
brilliant. And sugar cravings, obviously it's been almost maybe 3-4 months, I've lost count, since we've all been stuck at home. And sugar cravings, you know, at the beginning, you just wanted to comfort eat, a lot of people. So sugar cravings, what are your tips to beat them if it's a not a nice habit that we've picked up during the lockdown?
So first, I'd look at where you're consuming your sugar. And if you're adding sugar to tea and coffee, for example, that's the first place to get rid of it, because the more sugar you consume, the more you're going to crave, because all you're doing is constantly spiking your blood sugar levels, and they're going to drop, and then you're going to feel more hungry and crave more sugar. So really avoid adding it to tea and coffee. Look at your snacks. And actually what I tend to find with a lot of people is their meals tend to be quite healthy, full of nutrient-rich foods, and it's the snacking where they tend to be consuming the most sugar. So are you filling your cupboards with, you know, lots of chocolate, lots of cakes, lots of biscuits? Or are you filling your cupboard with nuts, oat cakes, hummus and carrots, peanut butter that you can have with an apple? And really filling your cupboards with the healthier, lower sugar foods is going to help you, because essentially what you fill your cupboards with, you're going to eat. So firstly, don't buy it. Secondly, check in with your habits. So are you craving your higher sugar food, or is it just a habit? You know, some people find that once they finish dinner, they crave something sweet.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily that they, you know, are craving it. It's the fact that they're so used to jumping up from dinner and going for something sweet that they then associate that. So trying to break those associations, and whether that be simply just sitting down at dinner for a prolonged period of time before you jump up, put your plates away, get the next thing out. Actually just sit, take a breath, maybe make a herbal tea, and allow time to digest. And then you'll find that actually you can break those habits and those associations really easily. The other thing is looking at when your cravings come in as well. So for example, do you always crave at a certain time in the afternoon because it's, you know, when you take an afternoon break, or whatever it may be? And maybe in your afternoon break, instead of wandering into the kitchen, maybe you can wander out the front door for 5 or 10 minutes for a walk instead. And really just trying to break those behavior chains, because as a result of that, that can help to reduce your sugar intake. Do you follow that? I feel like that was a bit of
that question was from Adina Barkley, so I hope, Adina, that answered your question.
I hope you followed that, Adina.
I'm sure she did. A message has come up from the High Cancer Care Northwest group on Facebook, Jenna. How often should one be eating oily fish per week? That question must come up a lot for nutritionists.
Yeah, and that's a really good question. So oily fish is a really good source of omega-3, which is particularly important for brain function and joint health. And it's recommended, if you're getting your omega-3 from oily fish, 1 to 2 portions a week is ample.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. There's so many more questions, but I think we're going to have to slowly wrap it up. That has been an amazing food for thought. I hope it's given lots of people lots of information. I've certainly learned from you, Jenna.
Oh, thank you. It's been so lovely speaking to you. So thank you so much.
As well, and I'm looking forward to getting out of COVID lockdown and actually being able to put some of those nutritional tips to good use. And I'm going to take you back over to Louise, who's going to wrap tonight's event up.
All right, thank you so much. I start off by saying a little bit of dark chocolate is not so bad, as long as a little bit. I had no idea, Jenna, you were going to say, and you made me very happy, and I imagine many people listening, that it's actually good to have some dark chocolate because it stimulates your adrenal glands. So there you go. So we can have it without any guilt feelings. I'm also going to say thank you very much for a lot of practical advice. I always resisted buying peanut butter, but now I'm going to buy some peanut butter to have with my apples. So I will think of you lunchtimes when I'm going to be having that. We really, really learned so much. We're very grateful. And thank you to Suzanne for so smoothly moving things along, and for all your involvement. And yeah, thank you very, very much. Before you all turn off, we have a surprise for you. We want you to leave on a high. And please don't turn off. I'm not going to say too much. Enjoy, and we look forward to hosting more sessions in the future. Thank you. Good night.
What do I think? It's a match. What? You agree? I agree. You made me a happy man.
Good.
Let's drink on it.
Why not? To you.
No, my friend. To you.
To the both of us.
To our agreement.
Our agreement.
To our prosperity.
Our good health and happiness.
And most important,
to life,
L'chaim.
L'chaim, L'chaim.
To life.
Here's to the father I've tried to be.
Here's to your bride to be.
Drink L'chaim to life, to life. L'chaim. L'chaim, L'chaim to life.
Life has a way of confusing us, blessing and bruising us.
Drink L'chaim to life.
God would like us to be joyful, even though our hearts lie panting on the floor.
How much more can we be joyful
When there's really something to be joyful for.
To life, L'chaim.
to title
My daughter,
My wife, it gives you something to think about, something to drink about. Drink L'chaim
to life, to raise a wolf to Tanya,
to title my daughter my wife.
futures be pleasant ones, not like our present ones. Drink L'chaim to life,
L'chaim. L'chaim, L'chaim to life.
It takes a wedding to make us say, let's live another day. Drink L'chaim to life.
We'll raise a glass and sip a drop of schnapps in honor of the great good luck that favors you. We know that when good fortune favors two, such when it says to reason, we deserve it too.
To life and all good fortune.
Be happy, be healthy, long life.
And if our good fortune never comes, here's to whatever comes. Drink L'chaim.